What we're going to do now is we're going to move into the next section of the program, which is a lot now about bringing those stakeholders onto the stage to share some real-life examples in Africa. So we've got a variety of the regions. So obviously we have Namibia, we have Madagascar, and we've got Zambia, and our moderator is from Ghana. So what we want to do is, with this, the way we put it together is we didn't want you to hear the same story. So we've got an airline, an airport, and a destination. And what we want to hear about is obviously how they engage with each other and how they've partnered and what successes they've had, but also some of the challenges. Because I've got to be honest, Tim, I'm slightly skeptical of your first Slido in terms of the results, that people are saying, oh, we're already doing it. I'm not sure that that's absolutely how I would see it. So I think there's a lot to learn here. You might have thought you were doing it, and after seeing that, you might think, actually, there's quite a long way to go. So I just think that's all something for us to reflect on, definitely. So what I'd like to do now is introduce your moderator for this session, which is Francis Doku. So Francis is a respected journalist and commentator from Ghana. He has many strings to his bow. He is an expert in destination marketing, strategic communications, and he's here as a representative of Voyage Afrique, one of our event partners. Many of you in the room will know Kojo Bentham-Williams very well. He will be with us, but unfortunately he can't arrive until Friday morning because there is a UN tourism event happening in Abuja today. So not the greatest in terms of communication and collaboration there, but these things happen. Yeah, really excited for this. I'm really excited to welcome Francis to the stage. And over to you, sir. You can take over.
Thank you, John. I bring you greetings from Accra, Ghana, sunny Accra. And I believe that we're going to have a very interesting conversation, especially as Tim has really introduced us to the subject. We're going to look at the power of partnership, how airports, destinations, and airlines collaborate to grow connectivity. These are three important sectors of the aviation and tourism, and we believe that each of them have the experience in how they collaborate, and we're going to have that conversation. To help me be able to unpack this, I have three leaders in that space. Let me introduce to you Keira Langford-Johnson. Keira will join me. Keira is a business development director from Proflight, Zambia. Keira? And from Namibia, we had, please put it together for Keira. From Namibia, we have Charmaine Matheus. Charmaine is the head of marketing, and Charmaine has also been acting as CEO at Namibia Tourism Board. Charmaine. And then last but not the least, we have Minosoa Tatamo Rakotozafy. Tatamo, as I'm told, the O is always silent. It's a head of aeronautical activities from Ravinala airports in Madagascar. So the objective of this session is to look at how airports, airlines, and destinations collaborate to drive connectivity within and outside of Africa. And we want this to be very interactive as much as possible. So we have this question for you to answer as we go on. First is that, what is currently, in your view, the biggest barrier to improved air connectivity across Africa? And there are some sub-questions that you can answer, along 5 of them. So you can scan and then answer, and as we go on, we'll bring that in as part of our conversation. We'll also try as much as possible to engage you as we go along, as much as possible. So now let me start this with this very distinguished audience, ladies from Proflight, from Ravinala, and from Namibia Tourism Board. First of all, ladies, I want each of you to tell me, very simply, in a very short time, what has been your sector's most important collaborative way of dealing with airlines and airports and the tourism board. From the airline perspective, what has been the most important in your view? And then we go to Charmaine and then to Tatamo as well. So let's start with you, Keira.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Francis. Tim has said so much of it already, and in Proflight's experience, I think one of the most successful new regional routes that we've ever launched was Lusaka, Cape Town, and that was a result of the exact collaboration, the holistic approach, and the market intelligence that we were given by Westgro. The fact that the airport approached us with a proposal, with information, with data-driven evidence, and that made it easy for us to mitigate the risk. Airlines don't like to burn cash or fuel unnecessarily. They're four-letter words, and Westgro was able to convince us that by going onto that route, our risk was mitigated through the data and the holistic approach that Tim has already talked about today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Francis, for the question, and to the Avia Dev team for having us. From Namibia side, of course, from the tourism board's perspective, I think one of the key aspects or driving factors has really been supporting new routes with marketing initiatives. And of course, we do that strongly through the AirConnect team, but also just ensuring that routes really remain sustainable through ongoing campaigns. But not just, in addition to the campaigns, I think also a key aspect is supporting the DMCs and the tourism travel trade in the destination to be able to promote the route and promote the offerings that the destination actually has. So that's the one key thing. Another aspect is also just having a data-driven approach to decision-making. So of course, together with various stakeholders, as was presented earlier, in Namibia, together with NAC, some of our travel trade as well, NIPDB, where a number of stakeholders just coming together and being able to actually share data and utilize that to inform our various strategies. Yeah.
Thank you, Charmaine. So, Tatamo, Ravinala manages 2 international airports in Madagascar. What, in your view, has been the biggest contribution to connectivity from your sector?
Good morning, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me well. Yeah, that's better. So, very happy to be here today. We manage the 2 biggest airports in Madagascar, Antananarivo and Nosy. And to set the scene a little bit, we have been in a collaborative route development approach fairly in an early stage now. And the biggest achievement, I think, that we've done lately was the launch of Emirates flights in Madagascar last year. So I believe that there was a before Emirates and then after Emirates era, because this new air service has brought and covered everyone in the ecosystem very much, including government. So how things went is that in the first place, it was the airport which was leading the project. But then afterwards, after the pandemic, because it was a long-term process, the government started to need the recovery of the air traffic, but also needed to improve the economy. And that's where started the idea from our side to gather everyone and say, there is an opportunity, there is an airline interest on Madagascar since like 5 years. Emirates was looking after that route during a long time, but due to COVID and due to fleet issues, it didn't happen. So what we wanted to show to the government is that economy impact of the new connectivity, especially for a global carrier. So it took a long time. It was like 2 or 3 years of work together. But then even before the launch and while we were doing the launch and after the launch of the route, we have seen very big involvement from all the stakeholders, and we created the momentum around that new service. And I think that that is the most powerful thing that we can bring to the economy and to the ecosystem, because we are in a world in Madagascar where the airport is privately owned. So all of our stakeholders are public or government entities. And I get back to what Tim said earlier, to say that when you are doing it and leading it as an airport, people think that they have that perception that you just want to make profit and make money. They don't believe that you also have some economy aspiration for the country and etc. So I think that that's the biggest project that we had since now.
So just to follow up on that, and then I'll come back to Charmaine and Keira. How did these come together? What is the collaborative journey that led to the Emirates landing at your international airport?
I think it was economic opportunity. So getting back to data always, and getting back to data always showcasing to the government, because somehow, even if you don't collaborate like regularly, we need each other to work together somehow. And we needed to go further on that approach of collaborations. So the first step was to gather the local tourism ecosystem, to say that Madagascar is one of the unserved destinations in terms of global carriers in the Indian Ocean region, but Africa. And then when we convinced the tourism board to work on that project, everyone was starting to show interest on that. The demand was there, showed by data again. And then we've seen that everybody was starting to work on their, let's say, level. So the airport, we were working with the network planning team of Emirates. The tourism board was working on the marketing side of the routes, meaning farm trips, promotion, and the government authorities were working on an upper level with the decision makers from Emirates team, and everybody was pushing a lot. And finally, when it happened and they announced the route, that was the second challenge, because there was like 3 months between the announcement and the first route. And there, we needed to start to work again and make things work and make things happen. After the launch of the route, we needed to work again because we saw that there was that momentum, and we started to work together to retain the route and to make it grow. So in terms of results, now Emirates, after 6 months of operations, they doubled the capacity in Madagascar thanks to that collaboration.
I think that is thanks so much. So, Charmaine, maybe you want to give us one example of something that was very successful in terms of collaboration with airline and airports for Namibia's tourism. Because as Tim said, and as we know, tourism is the biggest winner when connectivity is achieved. So tell us one very good example, and how that was achieved.
Yeah, well, at the time we had South African Airways that just launched an additional route to Johannesburg, Mauritius. And of course, we stepped in as a tourism board and partnered with SAA. We already had the relationship established prior, so it was really just a pickup from sort of where we left off. And of course, Namibia does not have direct flights to Mauritius yet, and vice versa, so it's really piggybacking of our Joburg route. So again, they approached us, and we partnered to do a campaign with them. But the campaign was really more focused on capacitating the decision makers in terms of the travel decision makings, travel trade in both Mauritius and Namibia, to be able to promote the destinations. on both ends. So we had, initially we did a webinar, an online workshop with key service providers from rental agencies to just DMCs, accommodation establishments, and tourism board as well. Just doing, we did a workshop, and of course that was then followed through with a familiarization trip where they came through to the destination and we were able to showcase some of the key attractions of the destination firsthand to these stakeholders that we engaged. Yeah, that's just one of them. Recently there was Air Angola. Angola also launched a route to Namibia, and we had a workshop with the local trade, just sensitizing them about this new route, but also again, how do you package the destination? How do you create packages in order then to be able to promote again increased arrivals? Yeah.
Thank you so much. And yeah, shall we do it for her as well? And Keira, one example of the most successful thing that you've done over the last few years in terms of connectivity to any of the destinations and how that came by, and we'll look at that.
I think the most successful, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I think the most successful thing that we've done in terms of connectivity was the launch of our Lusaka-Joburg flights. Not because of connecting Joburg, because Joburg and Lusaka have always been well connected, but because of the power of our own network and being able to connect throughout the 10 domestic destinations and being able to service the rest of the country. So filling that connectivity gap, I think is probably the most successful. And our Joburg flights were born during COVID, and the Cape Town flights came on the back of that, which I've already mentioned. And I think the success of that, sorry?
Sorry.
Okay. And I think that a lot of the success of that is having a partner when you're collaborating who understands that airlines, destinations, and airports have very different priorities. And for an airline, we don't have the luxury of making decisions for social responsibility, economic development, national interest. We have to make decisions for profit. Airlines need to be sustainable. And I think having a partner, so in this case, Maestro, who understand that in order to get an airline to connect to their destination, you need to make a business case and you need to provide the evidence, and you need to show not only how you're connecting, in this case, the Victoria Falls and Table Mountain, two of Africa's biggest tourist destinations, but how it's benefiting the rest of your network. And again, opening up Zambia to Cape Town was a huge advantage. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And so this point that Keira talks about is key to how partnerships would work or not work. So there are different interests. The destination has an interest, the airline has an interest, and the airport has an interest. So what are usually the friction points? Let me start with Charmaine. What are usually the friction points that brings challenges if you want to collaborate, and work together?
Yeah, Francis, of course, bringing together stakeholders, diverse stakeholders with various needs, or let me say priorities, can be a bit of a challenge. Of course, as earlier presented, we need to focus on the positives, and there are so many. And of course, that is the way to go, being more organized, having a more collaborative approach, and of course being data-driven. But with that, challenges can arise. I think for us, I'll first speak from the tourism board's perspective. It's just really the initial costs that are involved in terms of investment, especially when it comes to marketing initiatives. You might find a airline that is, showing interest in the destination. However, some of the demands or requests at times just does not, speak to the available budget, if I may say so. So that can be quite a challenge. And really, you look at the pros and cons in that aspect. But I think, just really the high investment that is really required at the initial stage of implementation. So I think the other aspect is also just in terms of revenue generation. From the tourism board, we might be looking at increasing the tourism revenue through new attractions and new markets, new source markets, but also looking at a higher spend per tourist for in the destination, whereas airlines and airports could be focusing on attracting more frequent flyers, regardless of how much they're actually spending in the destination on tourism-related businesses. So that's just some of the key items, really. Another thing could be pricing as well, where airlines are, they might tend to push airports to lower, let's say, landing fees, for example. Of course, that's to reduce their operating costs, but then this could also be at the expense of, or it could negatively impact the airport's revenue, and of course potentially lead to increased costs and higher costs for tourism authorities and tourists as well. So just some of the key challenges there.
Thank you so much. Tatamo, what are some of the challenges that come along, when you want to collaborate with different partners?
By 2028, Madagascar wants to achieve 1 million of tourists. To bring that, we need to work together.
What's the number now?
Now we are, let's say, little less than half of it.
Okay.
So the problem is that the first step is to align the vision and the strategy, which is not easy, because to achieve 1 million tourists, the private operator said we need hotels. Government says we need more infrastructures. Airport says we need more connectivity. Tourism board said we need more promotion. So the main challenge first is to align all those priorities, because 2028 is not that far.
It's not.
And we need to have a clear vision. Even when the objective is the same, the way to achieve that target is very different from a stakeholder to another one. So that is the first main issue. Second one, we get back to budget. Funding, how we fund that project now. Airport is a private operator, so everybody is looking at us to say, give the money. Public authorities would say, we are here to make logical decision to support you. Private operator would say, investment, but show us the data. Second challenge. Third challenge, the data. When we are going to an airline and pitch and say we have opportunity of traffic, etc., they would say as well, what are the tourism data, what are the economic data? And that is also a challenge, because data is an education to have. Most of the time we are mostly driven by feelings and senses to say, it can work, but prove me it can work. The airline would say to you, give me the numbers. Yeah. And that is also, the data education is something that we needed to face too, because we needed to tell people, now let's build a common business case that everyone is going to use and show the right information to the stakeholders, to the investors, and that can accelerate things as well. So basically, main challenge were on these points.
Very good. So, Keira, from your perspective, what are some of the tension points that hinder proper partnership for route development and connectivity?
Thank you.
I think it goes back to a lot of what we've already said. I think a lot of those tension points are not understanding each other's, not being aligned on priorities, and not understanding what everyone needs to get out of the partnership. And I think this is where feedback and collaboration is so important, to understand and appreciate that everybody's objectives are different. And speaking from a small airline's perspective, I mean, we have found that our small gauge equipment is perfect for the small market that we operate in, but that's not always understood by the policymakers and the airports and the tourism agencies. So why don't we operate 737s? We operate thin market routes. The infrastructure doesn't always support larger aircraft, and we don't have the volumes always to sustain larger aircraft. But equally, we don't have the infrastructure to support, and we don't have the tax structure to support. So we've talked about high airport charges, high taxation, but that's also because we have a very small industry. In many of our countries, we have a very small industry that has to carry all of the costs of the regulator and the airports, and that's a challenge, and that's what we need to concentrate on. I think we all know the theory, and we all know that partnership and collaboration is what's needed, and we know what needs to be done, but how do we achieve that? And I think that's the big question, is how do we implement what we all know to be the case?
That's a good one. So let's come to Tatamo. Let's go to policy, regulation, and support by government. I mean, there's often the thing said that African governments are very slow to act, to bring policies that will help grow different sectors in the industry. How does policy, or the lack of it, help to grow these partnerships and route development from your perspective as an airport?
From the government perspective, I would say that easily is to take, support. There are some supports that they can bring very easily. The first one is the frontier, the visa policy, but also the open sky, traffic rights, which are normally things that can accelerate decisions, or from an airline perspective, but also to boost very much. We've seen a lot of examples in Africa of open frontier and the traffic rights liberalization that we can use as an example to showcase how much this policy can help to grow air connectivity. The second one is the visa processes, free visa, e-visa, for countries, the main countries which are interested in the destination, the main market sources, but also in the, let's say, more global perspective, the infrastructure. Most of the time, so Madagascar is an island. The main way to come to Madagascar is by air. So normally air connectivity should be in the top priority. But air connectivity doesn't get alone, because we need also roads, we need also security, we need also hospitals. So that's where the government can have very powerful influence to grow air connectivity. And the last thing is bureaucracy. Decisions takes time because government has a lot of priorities, and I think that bureaucracy is something that we need to work on very much, and that's our one of our fight with the government currently is to accelerate those decisions, because sometimes you miss the opportunity when you don't go fast. And air connectivity is a very competitive industry. So in front of us, we have a lot, the airline has a lot of destinations in front of them. If you don't have a quick move, they will move to another one, and you will miss that opportunity very easily.
Thank you. Charmaine, you can speak to that. Right?
Yeah, definitely. And I can relate with some of those that have actually been mentioned as well. Of course, the first thing that comes is really just the importance, again, of ease of communication and approval processes. So decision making and speed in that has been mentioned quite a number of times this morning so far, and it's really a challenge. Of course, there are processes that are in place, and they are there for due diligence and all other aspects, as we understand. But I think, like it was earlier mentioned, that you miss opportunities. You really do miss opportunities, and just confirmations of key decisions that could actually have an enormous impact and bring a change to the destination by having to go through multiple of channels. So really just easing the communication and approval processes, that's one. And of course the speed in decision making that was mentioned. But another thing also is, of course, just the visa facilitation and being able to ensure that the traveler and the tourist has an amazing experience from the point of entry of the destination. So I think more just discussions on visa facilitations and how that can be more easeful for the traveler as well. Yeah.
Talking about visas, I'll give a simple example. I mean, between Ghana and South Africa, there were visa waivers in 2023, 2 years ago, and travel numbers from Ghana to South Africa increased by about 239% just on that, which means that it's a very important thing to look at. I mean, there's Agenda 2063 from the AU perspective, but how do we, as a continent, try to level that to increase access? What kind of partnerships can we do to make sure that we, ahead of Agenda 2063, or whatever will happen, bilateral agreements and all that would help ease the the visa regime and improve on our connectivity?
Yeah, indeed. I think there's a lot more collaboration between the countries, between countries, especially if we look at Africa as a continent. We speak a lot about promoting inter-Africa travel to say that Africans are the first ambassadors of the destination. So we should be able to access each other's destinations with ease. But of course, we understand and we respect the various governments' priorities and objectives as well when it comes to who they're allowing into the destination. There's a lot that goes into that as well. And but again, I think it's more, one thing is at the point of entry, just being able to have proper facilitation measures in order for the process to flow easily. The traveler should not be, does not need to spend hours and hours of queuing just to get through. So if, of course, the visa requirements and all that can be there, but I think just making sure that there is a ease in the process, immigration process at the point of entry. But again, also just collaborations and being able to open up the borders to one another as Africans as well, looking at that is quite, I think, is a key one. I do remember, like, for example, with Ghana, we didn't have, Ghanaians didn't require visas to Namibia for the longest time. However, Namibians were required to carry a visa to Ghana.
It has to be both ways.
Yes, so you see, being able to open up each other's borders for one another, I think, is also vital, and having that reciprocity in place. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And we're having conversation about partnerships and how airports, airlines, and destinations can collaborate to drive connectivity. I think one of the key things also, Keira, that hampers, if you like, how people travel to different destinations is cost. In Africa, I saw a post by Larry Madowo of CNN that it costs him more to travel from Kenya to Cote d'Ivoire for the Africa CEO Summit than it costs him to travel to Washington, to the US. Why so? Why is it so expensive travel in Africa? And how can we go around that using partnerships and collaborations?
Thanks. That's a very big conversation. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely. I think it's one of our biggest challenges is the cost of travel, and there's a lot of reasons for that, and I think we all know what they are. Some we can't change, like distances. Africa is a very big continent, and our countries are very big, so distances is one part of it. But I think the bigger part is we don't have secondary airports in many of our African countries. We don't have the infrastructure at all the airports at a destination to support larger carriers. And the biggest one is that we just don't have the volume. Again, a lot of our tourism destinations are thin routes, and we just don't have the volume to bring the cost down. And as I said, a lot of our countries have small gauge equipment, and we don't have the economies of scale because of the lack of demand. But this is where we should be forecasting that demand rather than relying on historical data and trying to see how we can remove barriers in order to grow the volume and remove the barriers with travel regionally, not just internationally.
Good. So Tatamo, you want to take a bite of that before we go to the last question, and then we come to the audience to have their view. Yeah.
I think the main barrier in terms of costs when you fly in Africa is the air connectivity. Because, for example, if you want to come to Madagascar, if you have to go via, it will cost you a lot rather than a direct service.
Yeah.
So that is one thing that we should work on very much. Second one also is from an airport perspective. I'm speaking from an airport perspective. For an airline, for example, as she said, there are some barriers in terms of cost due to fuel. Fuel in Africa is very expensive. Most of the time, we have a monopoly on the provider, and that provider is supported by the government. So fuel is like we have that tax on the ticket flight, which makes, let's say, 20% of your ticket flight. So when the fuel is 30% expensive than anywhere else, you have the invoice is pretty much higher. So that's the second one. And the last one, I think, in terms of barrier of cost is also the positionment of our destinations. Most of the time, we are targeting very far markets, like European, like USA, like, far market destination. And we have a positionment to say we want our destination to be, let's say, a luxury destination, or, like some in the destination in the Indian Oceans. So we don't necessarily think about regional markets where we can have also a lot of traffic volume. And the fact is that regional market doesn't have the same capacity of buying than the European one, for example. But there is an opportunity and there is a big potential, I believe, on that. So from my opinion, that's the main thing that make the cost higher to travel intra-African destinations.
Charmaine, some say the government are a bit too greedy, so they put a lot of taxes, and other levies and costs, and that's what drives up the cost of, air transport in Africa. That's genuine concern. Could governments reduce taxes and make sure that it rather helps for people to travel than want to get the best out of charging the airlines and individuals so much on air tickets?
Yeah, well, Francis, of course, that's one aspect, but I wouldn't put it entirely on the government and taxes. Of course, that's one aspect, but I think across the entire chain, from the airline, from the government to the airline, to the airport, to the tourism, even in tourism, in the tourism industry. I mean, on so many occasions we've heard that, for example, in Namibia, we've had the challenge where accommodation pricing was just too high for the tourists. So I think each stakeholder has got a role to play in looking at what is it in our industry that we can do respectively to help reduce the cost for traveling from the air ticket, like I mentioned, the airlines, the airports, the tourism sector. So I think it's across the chain, and I wouldn't just put it on one player.
All right, so Keira, let me ask this question. What does it take to put a lesser-known destination or secondary airport on the map? And maybe after that, I'll come to Tatamo because she's more there. So what does it take, from your perspective as an airline, to put a lesser-known destination on a map so airlines will now decide to go?
I think the simple answer is money. No, I think to put a lesser destination on the map, you need collaboration and the partnerships that we've already talked about.
Yeah.
You need the tourism board or the tourism agency to promote the destination because they need access. You need the airline to put the route on, and you need the airport to provide the infrastructure and make sure that it's going to be viable for the airline. And so again, we come back to data and the evidence-based analysis, the business case. But I think what's done in a lot of the world is having public-private partnerships or PSOs, etc. And I think that is something that we haven't tried as much of in this region. And having that government support and having private public partnerships to work together to have tax incentives to jointly promote the route, to have strategies to grow the demand, and to protect the private airlines if they do go on to secondary airport thin marginal routes, whether it's exclusivity of traffic rights over a period of time, whether it's load factor incentives, whether it's marketing support. But I think it is all rooted in financial support and in order to ensure that it's viable.
Thank you. Tatamo, you are from the airport, Antananarivo and Esime. What does it take to put a lesser-known airport on the map for airlines to decide that we want to go here?
So in Madagascar, we manage two airports, Antananarivo and Nusibe. Nusibe is the second international airport in Madagascar, but it's a very small destination. It's an archipelago, and it's an 100% leisure destination. What we've tried to do since we launched the concession of Ravinala airports is to put Nusibe more on the map in the Indian Ocean region, not only as a beach destination, but in a very complete destination where we can stay for like 14 days and never get annoyed. You can go hiking, you can have cultural tourism, you can do wellness, you can have food, you can also have beach activities. I mean, you have 14 days very complete, even if you're in your family or couple or young people. So the first thing that is very important is to work on your data and to have a clear strategy. After that, to gather local stakeholders, because everyone is used to work in a silo, especially in our tourism industry. And when you have to do that, you need to convince people that it's what they have done since decades was good, but we can go further. So that's the first step. After that, you need also to have that mindset to innovate and collaborate. In addition of collaboration, we needed to bring more, let's say, ideas and initiatives and projects to highlight the destination in another way, because as an airport, our main goal is always to grow the traffic. So for us, that's the main topic. For tourism board is to have more tourists. Yeah. Some way we have an aligned objectives. But as I said earlier, the way to have that objective is very different from stakeholder to another one. So in that approach of innovative, we needed to work more on the marketing and digital marketing. And last year, the airport started to have a destination marketing agency. The destination didn't have one. but we work with them and had that also, let's say, education approach to convince that we need to innovate now. The way we were doing things since decades was good, but there are other ways also to have more results and to have it together. So that was something which worked very well. And another one is to break the seasonality. So you used to say that European holidays were our peak season, but we were starting to think, what if we have another seasonality now to grow the number of tourists? The fact was, we didn't have enough hotels at that moment for summer season, but we needed to grow in any way. So that's where we wanted to convince the tourism industry in Nusibe to say, let's work on the seasonality. Let's have digital marketing campaign. Let's bring influencers. Let's have a destination marketing agency. And it went quite well. And the funny thing is that it created a sort of momentum where the tourism board were also starting to have a new way to think about strategy for tourism. And now they are doing more than what we have done last year in terms of innovation and marketing and etc. And I think that sometimes maybe we have to lead something, but it can lead after to something bigger.
So we're on a road to 1 million.
Hopefully.
So yes, from your perspective as a destination marketing, how do you come in? When you want to make sure that you highlight one lesser-known airport or destination and see how to drive it up.
Yeah, thank you, Francis. As Tim presented earlier, through the Air Connectivity Forum, Namibia has been able to launch 7 new carriers and 4 new routes, and of course 3 that are currently in progress. All of this is only possible through a collaborative approach, which is what Namibia has been undertaking. Of course, aligning our priorities, and then being more organized, being more concise, and more collaborative and more data-driven, and very deliberate about what it is that we want to achieve collectively. So I think one of the key things is really having that integrated data approach, looking at what the airline has in terms of the landing and the arrivals, arriving flights and markets, but also looking at the tourism data in terms of the markets where we're really receiving the travelers from, being able to align that on that and build strategies around that collectively. So I think data-driven, understanding which source markets to focus on, but then also understanding your traveler, what it is that they're actually looking for. And from a tourism perspective, we understand that the tourists are looking for authentic experiences. They want, it's not just the usual anymore, which is, what makes us unique, of course, some aspects like wildlife and so on, and we've over-marketed that for the longest time. But I think as a destination, it's also very important to be able to diversify your offering more and more, continue to grow in terms of what it is that you're offering to the traveler, and looking at various segments as well. I mean, for Namibia, MICE is a key one that we want to focus on going forward. There's cruise ship tourism, there's culture and heritage, which we're seeing the numbers are actually also increasing in those areas. So being able to really diversify our offerings in the key areas that we know the traveler is actually looking for. And of course, the last but definitely not least is being able to really implement impactful campaigns, effective marketing campaigns, but also incorporating communication channels that speak to the market or to the traveler that you're actually targeting. looking at various ways, innovative ways, digital, to engage your traveler before they even reach the destination, because you want to influence their decision making from where they are, and being really innovative around how you communicate, and continuing to grow in that aspect. I think those are some of the key ways in which you can continue to remain on top and build on that. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Shall we put our hands together for Tatamo, Charmaine, and Keira? We're having conversation on partnership and how to collaborate to grow connectivity in Africa. So I'm coming to you, ladies and gentlemen. We asked a question earlier that what, in your view, is currently the biggest barrier to improved air connectivity across Africa? And you were supposed to answer. Let's see now what it is. It says the highest is what? Lack of collaboration between key stakeholders. I mean, which is the basis of this conversation, which is how we can collaborate more and others. So it's very instructive to see that that's the highest, barrier. So let's come to you and ask that, how do we sidestep or go around this barrier, which is lack of collaboration between key stakeholders? But also the second is high taxes and aviation-related charges, as we mentioned. We also see limited political will or policy support. Governments need to do better in that area. Poor infrastructure at regional airports, very important also. I think one of the things Ravinala pushed was to improve the airports in Antananarivo and Nosy Be. And then also absence of viable airline route strategies. These are very important that we collaborate on. But anybody has any views so far on the conversation we've had? We had about 5 minutes of that.
Yeah, anybody who's got any comments, but I think I did mention before, I said, I think maybe we're lying to ourselves because we said, well, we're all doing it, and now we're saying, no, we're not doing it, right? Yeah. So it's complete contradiction. So I think there's some soul searching that needs to be done. But yeah, we've got 10 minutes or so. If anybody'd like to make a comment, ask a question, share their experience in their destination. We've got a real variety here. Or airlines. Have we got anybody? Hands up. Yes, that's great, excellent. It's always, this will be the cascade. So if you can stand up, introduce yourself, and ask your question, that'd be fantastic.
Thank you. My name is Abdul Isiak, and I'm CEO of iPervey. We are a data intelligence company. A question, thank you, by the way, to the panel. Great insights. Given the fragmented regulatory environment and high operational costs across African travel, what collaborative steps can airlines and airports, including other stakeholders, take to streamline charges, reduce fees, and unlock more affordable, higher volume intra-African travel?
All right, nice, easy, little one to get started. Anybody particularly you'd like to ask?
I think actually it applies because we've got all the right stakeholders on the panel.
All right, who'd like to go first?
So, Keira?
Thank you for the question. What can we do? I mean, I think we all operate in digital silos, and I think that would be a really good place to start. I think sharing information and trusting our partners, and that's not just the ecosystem here is the airlines, airports, and destinations, but there are a lot more people in this ecosystem. There's the regulators, there's the investment arms of the government. There are a lot more private and public partners in this conversation, and I think trusting one another and aligning ourselves so that we share data, because we all have data, yet we all find data as the biggest challenge when it comes to taking risks and making big decisions. So if we start to share that data and we don't operate in silos and we incorporate, there's already systems in place to share that data, and if we embrace those, I believe that will remove a lot of the barriers, because a lot of our challenges is not knowing what the information is and not being able to trust the data. But that starts with trusting ourselves.
Yeah, I fully agree with what Keira said, and that was my point as well, really just on data. I think we need to have a collaborative approach to data, and again, understanding what it is that I always take it back to the traveler, understanding what it is that the traveler is really looking for, understanding the markets that we want to tap into, and the markets that we're also seeing coming into the destination, and how we can better meet those needs. But I think another aspect is also just in terms of sustainability. Being able, it's one thing to have the route launched, or to have a new airline come through, but it's another thing to actually sustain that relationship, and being able, and not just sort of leave them hanging, if I may put it as such. As a tourism board, and again, I'm not just speaking to one entity, but across the chain through with the various stakeholders, we each have a role to play to support the route in to be sustainable. And from a tourism perspective, I think just looking again, pricing, the traveler's pricing at the services that are being provided, and the products that are being offered by the destination. That's one aspect that we can look at. But there's so many other areas that we can look into, and of course, as stakeholders, share the risk in ensuring that the route remains sustainable, but also that the traveler has the best experience in the destination. Thank you.
From my perspective as an airport, I think that the main thing is obviously data, but also to align the vision, and keep the interests between the partners. It's very important, because you are the priority when your partner is seeing his interests, and when he is seeing his problem resolved. Thanks to your partnerships, things are accelerated and go well.
So we'll take one more question.
Yeah, absolutely. One more question. I'd just like to say as well, we have Afra with us in the room. We have Arza here. We have Barsa. We have IATA. They're all here. And so when you talk about data and driving these decisions and being more willing to share it, I'm sure they'd all agree with that. Yeah. We're delighted to have them as partners of Aviadev as well, and they're doing great work in terms of that advocacy. So thank you, Alex, and the rest of the associations that are here. So we've got time for one more question for this panel. Anybody? Yes, fantastic. Mr. BC, introduce yourself for everybody else.
Thank you, John. My name is BC Urap from the Namibia Airports Company. Obviously, we have participated in some of the initiatives that were given here by the speakers, particularly by Tim. I think we've spoken about the need for partnership amongst all the stakeholders, which is very good and it works. However, I think we have probably not emphasized the role of sometimes having an outside person to make sure that that partnership of all the stakeholders work, especially for smaller countries like ourselves. Sometimes it's difficult to get access to that data because it's costly, but sometimes you may lack the skills to analyze that data. So I just wanted to make the point that whilst it is important for all the stakeholders on the stage to come together to work, sometimes absolutely necessary to have a third party who has the expertise, the ability to get the data and other relevant information, but also just to get the glue together amongst the stakeholders. If only those stakeholders are there, sometimes we have our own biases, our own preferences, and just to have an outside party also helps to get things going. Thank you very much.
Yeah, really interesting point, because of course Namibia and the team and the Namibia Air Connect, and then of course ADP are involved with Madagascar, and Tim is involved in Namibia. So yeah, Keira, I think you wanted to make a point.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. And I think it's such an important point, and I'm just going to put it into one of the experiences that we've had. I mean, I've spoken at length about the air access team at Westro and how important it was having a single point of contact as an airline, when we were making that decision to go into Cape Town, having a holistic approach, able to get all the information in one place with the support. But from a Zambia perspective, we've also seen it during COVID. Since COVID, we've had on the Zimbabwean side, Victoria Falls, they adopted that strategy, and as a result, they've now got 6,800, an average of 6,800 seats a week into Victoria Falls. And across the border in Livingston, we've got less than 1,500. And Zambia dropped its visas for over 147 countries, I think, 2 years ago, which is fantastic. We've grown our tourism numbers from 1.4 million to 2.2 million in 2 years.
Wow.
But a lot of our tourists are still flying into Victoria Falls because of the access, paying for a visa and then crossing into Zambia for their holiday. So I think that that illustrates the importance of what you're saying with having an external party driving this process, so you have a single point of contact.
So your last comment, Charmaine, and then Tatamo. Then.
Yeah, I think just to speak on that, on that as well, and for Namibia, the NAC has been doing an amazing job spearheading the partnership with Tim and the team at helm. And as mentioned earlier, I think our story was told earlier in the very first presentation of how through a central point of contact we've been able to, or the destination has been able to implement new routes and bring in new carriers and so forth. So it is critically important, and as was emphasized, it's one thing to have access to the data, it's one thing to need the data, but it's another to actually being able to access the data and analyze it as well. So I think in that area, quite key and important.
Tatamo?
Yeah.
Your last word.
So from data perspective, as everything has been said about the fact that it's useful, but another point of expertise as well is to not forget that partnership, we make it because we need each other expertises as well. So even if your airport has a lot of data about traffic, we need also the tourism expertise, we need the airline expertise, and I think that when we are able to cover everyone and use all those informations together, that's where partnership is powerful.
Thank you so much. So ladies and gentlemen, the verdict from here is that collaboration is very important, but we need data, we need all the things that will support us to be able to get the best out of our connectivity conversations. And I think that from what you also said, the number one challenge is the fact that there's no proper collaboration on the different part of different stakeholders. And so I believe that this conference should find a way that we could work towards collaboration a bit more. Thank you very much, ladies, and thank you very much for your attention also. Thank you.